G'day everyone, welcome to the Digital Investor Podcast, and today we have a very special guest, Michael Frew, all the way from Las Vegas in the US. Now, Michael has an amazing story for us because his background's really interesting, which I know a lot of our listeners are going to relate to. Michael was a mid-six-figure income earner working in IT and then had a life change, saw the light, decided to start buying and selling online businesses, which is really cool. And really interestingly, he's done now over $2.8 million worth of acquisitions, mainly in the SAS software style online businesses. But today, I want to talk to Michael so he can share with our community his journey and why he loves buying and selling online businesses so much. So Michael, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast today.
Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here.
Michael, what an interesting journey you've been on. To give up earning a significant income and then to make the transition. That's what I want to look at, because a lot of our listeners are in that same boat. They're professionals, they're corporates, we teach a methodology here where don't give up your day job, start out small, buying and selling online businesses. And then when you're ready and you've built them up as a side hustle, you can transition. So for you, what was your journey? And where were you at? What were you doing back then when you're a high income earner in the US? What did that look like first and foremost?
Right. So I had hit about 18, 19 years in a corporate career doing development, engineering, consulting. And that's about when you start looking at, is this the right place for me? And the opportunity came where I could take a little bit of a sabbatical, right, in between kind of two jobs. And that's where I sat down, started to think, okay, if this isn't really the right direction for me, what else might be good for me to leverage my skills? I've done this long enough. I'm kind of a senior engineer by that time. And I think there's a lot of press and a lot of ink spilled about you need to start your own business, right? Or maybe get into real estate. And what I kind of found was that my skill set really landed in the operator position. I'm not really what I would say a true entrepreneur. I'm not taking something from 0 to 1, but I'm actually a lot better at taking something from 1 to 10. So with that operator role, it makes a lot of sense to look at businesses that are already running, already cash flow positive, already have marketing out there, probably already have a team put together, maybe some SOPs, and looking at acquiring a business from an entrepreneur who is ready to move on to their next thing, right? We know entrepreneurs, can't's a strong word. They usually want to start a new project very quickly, right? Yep. So a couple of years ago, it was blockchain. Now it's AI, it'll be something tomorrow. So those businesses that they run, there's an opportunity to acquire those, usually at a really good price. And then I just love operating them and trying to take it from that 1 to 10. And then I would sell it to the next person that would be a little higher than me, maybe have more scalability in a larger team, and then they can take it from there.
Okay. So what was your first deal?
Actually, I wanted to start small. And I think this is a question that a lot of people have quite often. Yep. Should we put all of our money into the business right away and buy one thing and hope it works, or look at starting something almost like a starter business? So I went with the starter business idea. First deal was $18,000, a very small site, and it just did Amazon affiliates. And so I learned a ton just running that because it still is, I'd hesitate to say it's a full business, but it's got a lot of the pieces to it. So starting with that, and I realized very quickly, okay, this is definitely something I want to do. How do I look to acquire something larger? And there's different funding and ways to do that.
And to get going with that, did you bought that through a broker?
Correct. Yes, I bought it through Empire Flippers back then.
And so that made we know the guys at Empire Flippers. They speak at our conferences and stuff. So as for you as a beginner, this is your first business. Did that make it a lot easier?
It did. Empire Flippers does a fantastic job with the transfer, and that is not true with some of the other brokers, and definitely maybe not some of the marketplaces. So what I found is I learned a lot from watching how they did the transfer, and learned a lot about what do I need to be prepared for on closing day? What do I need to help the seller understand we need to do right away? And so, that was actually really good to get something small, watch the process, understand where the stress levels are going to be, so that when you get something larger, you at least have that experience.
And that's what we teach, Michael, over the years, where we've said to people, it's funny, we have, high income earners, and they freak out when they buy a little tiny website. And I say, guys, if you're freaking out now, we need to practice this, because when you start adding a few zeros, it's exactly the same thing. So you can practice first. And I like that is important, though, to understand what are the things that are stressing you as a newbie to this. So, and
Yep.
did that site work well for you? Like, was it making a couple of grand a month or making $1,000 a month? Like, what was it like when you first took it over?
Yeah, so I had to learn a lot about how Amazon affiliate works.
Yep.
And as anyone that's a professional in that, it's a big challenge. So I learned a ton, was able to make some money with it. And really it taught me, hey, this is something I'd like to get more serious about. Start looking at a bigger business of the same thing. Because like some companies, you're just scaling the same thing over and over. And so the numbers can get bigger without adding too much more in the personnel department or in too much more stress. So that's kind of what I was looking for, was how do I find this, but a little larger and a little bit more scalable.
So you realize, so you bought this business, you realize, okay, this works. You've realized some pain points, you've learned a new skill. I'm interested, where were you at? So for our listeners, were you still working in IT? Where were you living? What was life like? And what let's look at now what happened next, because it's a big decision to go up. How do you get to 2.7 or 2.8 million in acquisition? So you've bought an $18,000 site. Let's give people some perspective of where you're living right at that point and what
Right.
life was like, because that's a pretty brave move, what you did next.
Yeah. So at the time, I actually lived in Poland. And so
Wow.
I was traveling quite a bit. And that was one of the reasons I lived there. I lived right outside of Warsaw, because it made it easier to get to Asia, made it a lot easier to get to Europe. And a lot of this travel, and you had mentioned earlier that you're making so much money that you start to get that golden handcuff problem. And so to resolve that, you really have to look for some sort of career switch that's going to be roughly around the same income. So like I mentioned, I took that little sabbatical where the travel had just kind of reached the point where I felt it had gotten unhealthy, and it wasn't something you could do for the rest of your life. I imagine some of your listeners have seen some of the people that have traveled for their whole life, and you don't really want to end up in that position. So I took a little bit.
We should clarify, this is the travel, no, not leisure travel. This is business travel, like for
Business travel
in IT.
Yep.
So you were
Yep. So this is all consulting. Yeah.
Do you mind mentioning a figure of roughly what sort of money were you earning at that point?
It's actually funny that now that it's been over 10 or 11 years, I can't really remember what I was making back then.
Yeah.
But it was over 500. And then you have all the perks because the travel's free, you're getting all the miles. But again, it may sound really cool on a podcast until you start doing it for a while. And it can be really tough. It's tough on the body. It's tough on your sleep schedules. You start relying on things like, all right, I'll take sleeping pills. And then you realize, okay, now I'm getting a dependency on this. I don't want this. So yeah, I was really looking for something that would kind of solve where I could still be in IT, but do it differently without all the travel. And that's where I took a little bit of a sabbatical, took some time to think about it. And then we actually moved to the Caribbean. And so we left Poland. So we went from quite a cold place and moved to the Caribbean. And that's where we started looking at, me and my wife, at doing some of the smaller businesses and acquiring something to replace the same occupation that I had before.
Yeah. So you had a need, like a lot of our listeners, to replace a very high income. And
it's tough.
Would you say, I was nearly going to ask, how old were you? Now, if you're a female, I couldn't ask you that. But like at that time, were you burnt out? Because I'm noticing with you would see this too amongst a lot of your friends and in our community. A lot of burnout now for guys like yourself and girls like females like yourself. Would you describe yourself as burnt out at that point?
Yeah, if I wasn't at that point, it was pretty soon. I had actually done 2 quarter life, I call them quarter life crises, where I just flat out quit my job. And it was from the same type of burnout. And both of those instances, I would leave and try and kind of reassess, okay, what I'm doing, I like being in IT, but I don't like the projects or, something. And I would kind of go back into IT, but with a different perspective. And so this third time when I did the sabbatical, that was kind of the time when I looked at it and said, all right, the new perspective is I'm going to move, those projects I work on in corporate, I'm just going to go buy those projects. And then I'm just going to do it myself. And I'm going to be the manager that I wish I always had, and do all those things. But you do need to be a little bit more senior in your career to be able to make those kind of choices and make those kind of moves.
Yep. So in this sabbatical, this is important. Was this a family decision, or was this something that you had to do because you felt burnout coming on? Like, how was your wife? Because you guys are used to living a very good lifestyle. What happened there? What was kind of the decision-making process? And was it a two-person decision?
Definitely a two-person decision. You asked a little bit earlier about age. So I was in my late 30s when this happened. So right about switching to 40. Definitely a family decision. And I think anyone that is with a significant other long enough, they're going to be able to recognize that stress and, something's wrong and not as happy as when we first met, what is going on. Yep. So, we're always kind of in that discussion of how do we grow as a family? What are we looking for our career for the next 20 years? And that was just really at 19, 20 years was such a good pivot point to say, hey, let's close a chapter on this first part of my career and let's open up a new chapter, which is leveraging all the skills and the networking and the knowledge that we learned and just take it a different direction.
Awesome. And so your wife's on board. This is unreal. Like it's so cool. Like congratulations to your wife, because it's a brave move for both of you to make this massive change. And so when you made that decision, did you go back to work at all? Or did you just go straight in then? Now that so you've got this little site working, what's the next step, Michael? What kind of happened then?
I had fortunately worked in information security, and so I'd saved up some money. And so as soon as I saw how much I enjoyed the $18,000 business, I immediately moved to a six-figure business. Right. That is what replaced the job right away. So this was a business that was growing. I still run it today, and that made the transition really easy. Now, there are listeners that could try that same transition, and maybe you acquire the wrong business and you go in a completely different direction. Yeah. So I think that's why it's so valuable for you to be doing your podcast and helping educate people to know, what are some of the things to look for that might be a bad acquisition or might be a bad direction. So, you can have one or two successes before you have your first failure.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one, was that through a broker as well? That went well?
Yes. Yep. That went really well. And that was very helpful. I reached out to the broker and I said, here's my very narrow niche that I'm good at. If anything like this pops up, just let me know. And it was just a couple months later, and I flew, ironically, out to Vegas from the Caribbean to meet with the seller, meet with the broker, and put that together. And that was right there. That was kind of the pivot of the career, where this was going to be my full-time focus.
Cool. And what broker was that?
That was with FE International.
Okay, yeah. So we've had Thomas on the podcast quite a bit as well, and so that was your first, like, kind of big-ish deal,
big one.
That's one that allowed you to replace your income. So from there, I've got to ask you this question: why did you move to such a cool place like Vegas? Like, what was the reasoning there?
Vegas it's an interesting place. What my wife and I found in the Caribbean was that we might have been a bit too young, where everyone there is either on vacation or has retired. And so, like I kind of described, we're in our early 40s at the time. We're still a lot of energy, a lot going on. And we met in Vegas years prior. So we would always come back to Vegas to kind of relive the excitement of being here. And what we found is we never wanted to leave. And it's going to sound terrible, of course, because we're saying, hey, we don't want to actually go back to the Caribbean. We'd rather stay here, and every bartender is groaning over how terrible that sounds. But in the end, we found that it was just Vegas is a better spot because so many conferences and workshops are here. It has really good business that's outside of the casinos. It's a 24-hour culture, which really helps, especially in this kind of global community that we have now. And we just really enjoy it. We enjoy the weather. My wife is Canadian, so anything that's going to be a little warmer is a bonus. And we just love it here.
Awesome. And that's leads me to another question, because you mentioned earlier you had the ability to, do the FIRE thing, financial independence. You'd done that and retire early. Now that when you look back at your journey, so you've been doing this for 10 odd years, buying and selling online businesses, and moving to Vegas, it looks like to me, you're deliberately moving away from the RE bit, like moving from the Caribbean, where presumably there's lots of retirees. But what's your advice around there for, anyone listening to this?
Right. Yeah, I think there's some certain personality types where maybe the RE part is tough for us to swallow. So moving to Caribbean, that's, I was doing the perfect retire part, and I almost immediately felt, I still have something to contribute to society. I have a lot of purpose and mission and drive, and I just couldn't retire and just sit there for barely 6 months. And so, I want people to understand that, there's a lot of discussion about retiring early and not liking your job and all of that, but there's also such value in purpose that you can get from it if you just find the right thing. So maybe I was thinking it was more financially independent, but pivot early and just pivot to the next thing that might be beneficial for you. And I did not do it on purpose, but now that I look back and hear you describe it, that's pretty much what I think happened.
Yeah, so I love that idea. That's a really good way to word it, is a pivot early, financial independence. And Michael, that's a really good concept for all of us, listening to this podcast. And one thing I'm going to ask you, so you've been on this journey, you've always been a high income earner, and now you're generating wealth through owning your own assets as well. When you think about, 2.8 mil in acquisitions and assets, when you look back now over this last 10 years or over your life's journey, what are your thoughts with assets? And particularly now in the economy, there's a lot of talk around, well, why would let's get into this. What should I invest in? Is it going to be real estate or online businesses? What's your comparison? Have you done real estate there in America? I know it can be very lucrative, just like here in Australia, but what I'm interested to hear from your point of view, what's your thoughts on various asset investments and real estate, say, versus the online businesses?
Right. Yeah. Great question. So I probably, like most of your audience, we know that you grow wealth through equities and debt, through real estate, and through ownership of business. So in a way, you almost have to pick one of those three to specialize in, and then maybe distribute some of your profits into the other two. So for me, it was business because I can control it more. Real estate, no matter what you do, in the end, you're a little bit under. Your returns are going to be affected by the market pretty much. Yeah. Equities is kind of the same thing. We have probably been very fortunate the last decade or two to have had some pretty good real estate, had some pretty good equity markets, but business also is a benefit of that as well. And I just felt like I am more able to direct how successful it's going to be because I'm in control of the business, especially if it's something that you believe you're good in. So for me, that was where I want to generate the wealth, and then I would kind of distribute it out into savings, equities, real estate. So I look at myself as I'm very, very good at doing my type of very narrow SaaS software solutions. So if someone tried to come in from the outside, from the real estate world, and compete against me, it would be a bit of a challenge for that person. I look at it the same way about real estate. There's a lot of real estate experts out there that spend just as much time as I do learning this and have been doing it for 30 years, like myself. Yep. How am I going to compete against them? So for me, I'm staying kind of, hate to use the term, in my lane, but it's what I'm good at. And so I like to put as much effort into that as I can. So for me, that's just my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you and I were talking earlier too, on that, making that financial independence pivot thing. The problem with retiring early just made me think of what you and I were talking about earlier. You're not getting to compound your wealth truly. And obviously that's what you've discovered as well. So what you just said, your lane is SaaS businesses. You're really good at it. So by owning them yourself, now as you get into your 40s and 50s, like Warren Buffett, that's when the knowledge kicks in. You get to compound your wealth dramatically from here on in.
Yes, and I think we touched on, if you think about your knowledge of different topics, the longer and longer you're in it, how much that compounds. It's the same with wealth, and it's the same with specialties. And so if you're to go against my pivot thought, but if you're pivoting so often that you're never actually accumulating that kind of experience, it could be detrimental kind of to your long term. But I definitely agree that, in your 20s, like, you should be looking around at trying different things. I always felt my 20s was when I found the things I didn't want to do. And then you can start specializing as you start moving up in your 30s and your 40s. And don't feel bad if you're outside of these, this is just a very general age ranges. But as we kind of get older, we do start to specialize in a few things. And that's where you can really leverage that experience to either create wealth, create health, what is important, do learning for other people, help other people be successful. So that's where that really starts to take off.
Awesome. And so for you now, so presumably you've bought a few other businesses, you've built up this portfolio and success. Have you done many exits?
Yes, I've done one exit, but I'm probably a little bit more like Warren Buffett in that I really enjoy the buy and hold. Awesome. And that's SaaS software can be really challenging because the numbers almost never tell you, hey, it's a good time to exit because it always it's either growing, but even if it's declining a little bit, you can project that out because that's what's so great about SaaS is the projection of the revenue and the profits. and say, well, I can sell it for 5x or just hold on to it, do nothing with it, and I'll get 10x over the next 10 years. So it's a tough one to ever really feel like you want to sell. But I'm mostly on the buy side, but always looking if there was a strategic opportunity and it made sense, let's put the business in the hands of somebody that would even be better than me.
And so these days, what are you doing? Because you're passionate about teaching other IT people like yourself, your experiences, so you share your knowledge, but also you're actively, you're raising funds in a way. So sell us on what Michael Frew is doing today.
Right. So usually the goal is, you acquire a business, maybe one every year, one every 18 months, get it stable, get it scaling, get a team underneath it, and then you can kind of move to the next one. So I had reached that point with a couple of businesses where I had the time and started working with a group called Web Street, which used to be Empire Flippers Capital. So they acquire businesses for passive investors that are usually accredited investors. And they reached out and asked if I wanted to help with their next round and be the SaaS operator. So we're right in the middle of that process where we're out looking to acquire the next one or two SaaS businesses for that fund. And that will be fantastic because it's a way for me to raise money without having to do all the hard part of raising money, all the legal stuff, all of the documentation. And I just get to be the full-time operator. And they have given me, full authority to make the decisions on what we're looking to acquire, what we don't like about it, the acquisition, and to run it myself. So it's the same thing, except it's just a nice way to get some more money and bring more people into this kind of wealth building opportunity, because there's not many people like me that can devote full time to this, right? I think a lot of people see how successful SaaS software can be, but there's no way they can do it, right? They have a full-time job or they're focused on something else. So this is a nice way to put some of your money into a fund and then have someone like me who's going to focus on it all the time, worry about it.
And how much are you allowed to say how much funding access or how much capital you'll have access to?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure if I'm allowed.
Okay.
So, but I'll step back and just make sure we don't get.
It's seven
It's definitely,
figures, though.
Yep. Yeah. Correct.
Yes. So we're allowed to.
Yeah, it's a good.
Presumably, we're allowed to say that.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good amount of money. It's the perfect size for the businesses that I like, which is that kind of 1 to 2 entrepreneurs that would then look to sell it to a larger team.
Yeah, and for you, when you compare, because you've bought content sites, affiliate sites, which is what we teach here in our community. But what's really interesting to me personally is, and our community members have heard about this SaaS business model. For beginners listening to this, can you describe what these SaaS businesses are that you're buying? What does SaaS mean, and why are they so awesome?
Right. Yeah. I think everyone probably is familiar with it in a way. If you think about Netflix or Amazon Prime, everything is turning into a subscription. My car wash is turning into a subscription. And it's because of how valuable it is to be able to predict your revenue, to use that to put your budget together. So it is March 13th right now. I can probably tell you within a couple percent what I'll make this month, and within the same couple of percent what I'll make this whole half of the year. That's pretty fantastic because most businesses on the first of the month immediately have to go out and find new revenue. So that model is why you're seeing so much change, that everything is becoming a subscription. So this is just the software version of it, right? So any service that you're paying, what's interesting is now there are subscription services to unsubscribe to all the subscriptions that you have, right? and that's how much it's infiltrated all of our lives. But yes, this is just the software version of having a subscription to something.
And so the businesses that you've got, say your bigger ones, roughly in layman's terms, what do they do? Like what is the software?
Yep. So for me, I do a lot of cloud infrastructure pieces. We run a proxy service for a bunch of cloud-based applications. I've got another business that it's a deployment platform for software developer applications. We do one that's an appointment reminder service. I have one that helps test emails to make sure that they're not formatted correctly, but that all of the networking part is done correctly, so that it doesn't bounce back because of some sort of technical issue. It's not the same as checking whether it's got spam or anything like that. So all of these are they're little tools that are used in the cloud. I really like tools that engineers use. So that's kind of my target market.
So nice, simple little tools that are used in the cloud. You've acquired these through various brokers just over the years. And then basically it's recurring incomes that
Correct.
come with existing clients who are already paying monthly fees. And so your job is just to keep the tech stack alive and improve it. But then
Yep.
is it hard to grow those? Like, do you grow them through SEO typically, or do you have to do personal outreach to businesses?
A variety of ways you can do it. So what I like to specialize in is engineers. Like everybody else, they have watering holes that they're going to go and have conversations with. So we kind of hang out in the same watering holes.
Like
We try and answer
Vegas.
questions when we need to. Yeah. We answer questions when they pop up. If we're the solution, if we're not, maybe go over here. So in that way, it's really just going to where the engineers are. Engineers and developers as a kind of a naturally a little bit suspect of things like advertisement, and anything that seems even slightly scammy. So I would say probably almost every developer has ad blocking software on, so they don't even see the ads. So we don't really spend much time on that. SEO is, kind of naturally, but it's more being more engaged with the community so that when they need a solution, they think, oh, I remember Michael's got this thing. Let me go give that a try.
Okay, cool. Because it's recurring, just so our listeners know, Michael, this is the other exciting bit, because listeners should know it, and you've kind of mentioned it a few times throughout here, the sales multiples. It's a different beast to affiliate sites, isn't it? So affiliate sites sell on a 3 times net profit. What are SaaS's businesses typically selling at, or work?
Yeah, I imagine there's probably some jealousy in your audience over the SaaS multiples, because they are usually higher. And then depending on what phase the SaaS business can be in their growth pattern, it can be a multiple of annual revenue or monthly revenue. But we're usually looking at like 4. As a buyer, I always want to say a lower number, but then as a seller, I want to say something higher. So let's say it's between 4. I bought up to 7x monthly
7X.
revenue. Yeah, and but that's a business that's growing. So if I remember my numbers right, like within a year we had gotten that down to 4 because it just kept growing, right? And so that's kind of your goal: is if I'm buying something on a higher multiple, can I grow it fast enough that it makes it less than 7 years? And the reason we want it that few, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, because it is riskier than real estate, right? There is no asset if something goes wrong, and that's why our multiples are so much lower. And we kind of need to recoup our money faster. But yeah, so let's say 4 to 7. That changes with the economy. Again, March 2023, interest rates have changed, funding sources have changed. There was a bit of a seller strike, much like you see in real estate, then a bit of a buyer strike. So everybody's still trying to figure out what is that multiple right now for this, each particular type of business.
Yeah. So bottom line though, generally SaaS businesses are a lot higher valued much higher than the equivalent kind of content sites because of that recurring.
That recurring revenue is just gold. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And like you said too, depends on the economy, which I hadn't thought of for SaaS businesses. I guess that's going to have a big impact. I should mention it's March 2024.
Yeah. So, did I say 23? Probably.
Yeah, it's 23, 24.
It's 24.
How time flies, huh? And
no kidding.
Out there now, when you're talking about the current date, so it's 2024, there's a lot happening in the economy. It's a really, really interesting time, as we all can sense, particularly for you guys in America. What are you seeing out there in the economy in terms of business acquisitions? Are you able to negotiate better, especially if you're coming in as a cash buyer now for these businesses?
Yeah, so there's a lot of dry powder out there. So there is a lot of cash looking to acquire.
Yep.
One thing that I've noticed pretty substantially is, as your listeners are probably aware, VC funds have stopped. They've turned the spigot off.
Yep.
So all those SaaS businesses that were just throwing money to acquire customers and didn't care about profitability, they suddenly don't have any way to continue running. So they are all coming up for sale. So if you're a turnaround specialist, or even someone that can bring profitability to a company that already has customers and already is working really well, this is a fantastic opportunity, because those VCs are just not paying for that right now. They're looking for cash flow and profitability, which is not how those companies were set up. So that's a bit of a change this year. So we still have rates a little higher. The last acquisition that I put together, and it was right at the change of 2022, 23. That financing model that I put together for that acquisition doesn't even exist anymore. Almost every way that went together, interest rates have taken that opportunity away. So yeah, a lot of things have changed because of the rates, because of what companies are coming for sale. It does seem that there's it's always hard to compare whether, are there fewer sellers out there or people just waiting it out. But you do see some of these general trends with the VC funds, with the interest rates changing a little bit, but it's still a pretty vibrant market. It definitely hasn't dried up. There was kind of the Amazon aggregators that dried up really fast, and that changed that market very quickly. And I think everybody is a little bit burned by that. And so I don't know if you want to expand on that for your listeners, if they know what happened with that. But
I like the take-home point. I think with SaaS businesses, that's really interesting what you just said. Just made my ears prick up a bit. If you're a turnaround specialist, it is a particularly good time to start hunting around now, because VCs have turned off the money. It's the same here in Australia. We're very involved with angels and VCs and stuff. And, we all know the money's kind of, it's still there. It's out there, but it's just, they're stopped. And like you said, these businesses, particularly SaaS businesses where they were, throwing lots of money at them, that's not happening now. So those particular owners, so it's a good time for someone like yourself, Michael, and anyone with a bit of IT background to get into this as well, to start exploring it.
Yeah. Another trend, I'll throw it out here just as a kind of my thoughts on it, is you're seeing a lot of AI businesses come up for sale.
Yes.
And we know, not for a fact, but we know that they're 3-6 months old. That's a little scary to me. That's a little young. It strikes me as something that I would continuously have to keep working on. So, again, maybe a caution to a buyer is don't jump at anything that maybe says it's an AI, powered business. And also for sellers, maybe don't talk so much about that part and tell me about the core of the business that the AI is helping with. And so, you can, it's both sides of the coin sometimes when you see this stuff.
Both sides. And so for you, it's a good time to get into it. To be, having raised funds, and congratulations. That must be an exciting, it is, going to be an exciting 12 months for you. Like,
right.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is just the start. So is that your plan to go bigger and bigger with that, or is it's something you'd like when you've tried that very first business? Is this something you're just trying to see how, what's it like to raise, 7 figures and start buying these things up?
Yeah, I go with the latter, maybe just to see, is this something I enjoy? I, like a lot of your listeners, are probably pretty interested in my lifestyle. I don't really want to get into a position where I'm managing 50 employees and on top of like a large organization of 55 SaaS companies. That actually is not a dream for me. I have a pretty flexible lifestyle right now. I kind of do whatever I want when I want. And so that's pretty important to me as well. So I've looked at many businesses where my wife and I sat down and said, this is going to change our life, and I don't want that. It's an awesome business, but somebody else would be better for it. So yeah, the Web Street thing, it's just an opportunity to see how this is. And so far it's been fantastic, and we'll see going forward if that's something we kind of do every year and for funds that they have each year.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'd like to say a big congratulations, and it'd be fantastic to get you along again later in the year and give us an update and share your insights in this marketplace, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to love listening to this, because it is so interesting seeing someone like yourself, your journey. And I want to say a big thank you for sharing your journey so openly with us today, Michael. That was just unreal, really inspirational. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to contact you?
Easiest way, my website is just my name, michaelfrew.com. It's spelled F-R-E-W. Just shoot me a message. I'm always trying to help people. I'm not selling anything. Just, if you have a particular situation that maybe I could help with, just let me know.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming along. And if you're an IT specialist, definitely go and check out Michael's website. And there's really cool stuff on there. I know, Michael, you're really good at helping out fellow IT coders and stuff, if they're interested in this field, make sure you go and check that out. But Michael, I want to say a big thank you for coming along today to the Digital Investor Podcast. That was awesome.